Hoy tengo el privilegio de estar rodeada de algunas de las mentes más brillantes que están definiendo el futuro de la tecnología. En este panel exploraremos cómo la inteligencia artificial y la innovación están transformando el mundo, guiados por tres líderes excepcionales. Satya Nadella, quien ha liderado a Microsoft hacia una era de posibilidades infinitas. Weil, un visionario clave en el desarrollo de productos revolucionarios en OpenAI. Y Dario Amodei, el CEO de Anthropic. Todo ello en formato de fragmentos escogidos. Comencemos.
President Trump announcing a new joint venture yesterday called Stargate to build and grow AI infrastructure in the U.S. OpenAI, SoftBank, and Oracle plan to commit $100 billion to start, potentially up to $500 billion over 4 years. Microsoft listed as one of the partners to the new venture. Joining us now for an exclusive interview is Satya Nadella, Chairman and CEO of Microsoft. Good morning to you.
Thank you so much.
It's so good to talk to you in the midst of all of this, because we're all trying to understand it and what it means, whether it's possible to get to $500 billion, and what it means specifically, I think, for your partnership with OpenAI, given that they had been using Azure exclusively and now obviously are going to be on other platforms as well.
Yeah, first of all, anytime a company that you've sponsored and were essentially a seed investor in raises money from others, it's a good day. A good day for OpenAI and a good day for Microsoft and our investors. Look, our partnership continues. We'll be a tech partner to Stargate, but more importantly, our partnership with OpenAI, you talked about exclusivity. OpenAI APIs are exclusive to Azure going forward even, so nothing changes there. IP access to Microsoft continues, and in fact, because of this, there will be more IP, and so therefore we'll benefit, and we have rev share arrangements that are great, and also OpenAI committed in a very significant way to Azure consumption, and so we're very thrilled about that as well. So all up, as far as I'm concerned, this accelerates OpenAI's model work, which accelerates Microsoft's ability to go to market with those models and really grow our business.
Let me ask you this. We had one of your competitors on early this morning, Mark Benioff, who has been very critical of this partnership. And one of the things that he said this is a demonstration of a fissure between the two companies, that you are going to go off longer term and build your own frontier models, and that there's a disconnect of some sort between Sam Altman and Mustafa, who you hired to run your AI program. Can you speak to that?
I mean, look, I think the partnership with OpenAI to us is a critical partnership. We love it. It's working. It's created a lot of value for us. And we plan to just continue forward with it. It's true that on Azure today, there are other models. There are open source models. We have our own small language models, and we'll continue to have all of that. Because customers at the end of the day are going to demand choice there, and that's fine, and we'll make sure we support it. But having a leading model on Azure exclusively is a great advantage to us, and it's good.
Let me ask you this. So I talked to Sam Altman at DealBook just about a month and a half ago now, and he says, I don't think we're disentangling, to your point. He says, look, I will not pretend there are no misalignments or challenges. Obviously, there are some. On the whole, he said that he thinks it's tremendously positive. What are the things where there's not alignment? One of the things I noticed in one of your filings recently is you actually put OpenAI as a competitor on your list, which I thought must speak about your ambitions long term.
Yeah, I mean, more importantly, I think for us, one of the things that, in fact, Stargate is the answer. You know, Sam wants to continue with the scaling laws to build out more compute in order for him to train more models. And we have a ROFR, so he comes to us first. If we meet those needs, then we clear it. If not, he can go to these other providers. And so therefore, I think it works out well for Sam and for us. So this was an adjustment, quite frankly, that we made in order to support both his needs, while at the same time keeping the integrity of what we wanted as the strategic value.
You were investing $80 billion already. How much money do you ultimately put into this?
So this is where, Microsoft is investing $80 billion in capital each year, and this year we're investing. And I'm not particularly in the details of what they're investing.
Okay, and so, but when you look at that $100 billion commitment, $500 billion potential, I don't know if you saw Elon Musk took to Twitter and said they don't have the money. The money doesn't exist, as if this is not really going to happen. What do you think of that?
Look, all I know is I'm good for my $80 billion. I am going to spend $80 billion building out Azure. Customers can count on Microsoft with OpenAI models being there everywhere in the world, serving OpenAI models and other models. That's, I think, what I know.
One of the other discussions here in Davos, and even before Davos, has been this question of whether there's a wall, whether the scaling laws will continue apace. And Sam Altman has been out there saying that they will continue apace. Sundar Pichai has been suggesting that actually it gets a little bit more complicated sooner than we may imagine. Where do you land on that?
I mean, I think both are true, actually, because the reality is I don't think there's a wall. Things do get harder with scale. And interestingly enough, pre-training scale with, as the scale goes up, gets harder. But then what Sam and team have shown, even with O1 and now O3, is this inference time compute and the ability to really have inference scaling compound in some sense the effects of scaling laws. So what used to be a 6-month doubling, maybe a 3-month doubling. So I would say scaling laws are very much alive. And the question now is, in fact, if anything, how do you take advantage of all this capability building to deploy real AI systems?
Where are you on your own frontier models? Obviously, you did hire Mustafa. You have your own efforts that are underway. What does that look like? When will we see that? And what do you think that ultimately does to, I mean, you've done remarkably with OpenAI, and that may turn out to be a spectacular investment unto itself, but how you think this whole landscape shifts at some point? I
mean, I think just to be very, very clear, we have access to OpenAI IP, so we're not going to do things twice. So we are very, very happy with the access we have to OpenAI. It's just that we do have other models that we have built. We built the public model that we talk about as Phi, which is an SLM, or small language model, 5.4. It's best in class for its parameter size. And we have other models too. But to me, the more important thing for me is to build value on top of OpenAI. So we have a fantastic post-training stack. We have done even a bunch of mid-training in different languages. So that's where our focus is.
When you think about the scaling laws, how much of all of this is simply about processing power? If you can buy enough NVIDIA chips today that you too can create a spectacular large language model. I look at what Elon Musk has done in the last 12 months, which is just remarkable. Built out a whole stack. He got a lot of NVIDIA chips, and he's done it. How much of it is about the processing power versus the algorithm?
I mean, look, it's all of it, but compute is intelligence. But on top of compute, you need the algorithmic breakthroughs too. I mean, so to some degree, if you look at even why the scaling laws are working, is because we're getting good at being both using algorithmic changes as well as data and data usage and compute efficiency. And that's where the capability is. When we say scaling laws, it's just not compute. In fact, it is faster than compute growth. So if the compute is done 10x, the capability is 100x. Why is that? It's software.
Let's start with the big news from overnight, which is Stargate. For those that did not read up or hear the breaking news, this is a landmark joint venture between OpenAI, Oracle, and SoftBank. $100 billion to start to invest in U.S. infrastructure to build AI. $500 billion over time. Tell us what is like the initial real benefit that we're going to see from this.
I mean, the number one thing we see, so yeah, like you were saying, Sam Altman, our CEO, Larry Ellison, Massa, and Trump announced in the Roosevelt Room this new company called Stargate, the intention to put $500 billion towards AI infrastructure in the U.S., with $100 billion already committed over the next 4 years. At the end of it, it comes down to the fact that everything that we see is that more compute leads to better models. Better models enable us to build better products, solve more problems for people around the world, and we're going really deep. So we're going to invest in that. We want to sort of take matters into our own hands, make sure that we have enough infrastructure, enough compute to do what we know we can do with the models as they get better. And so that's what this is about. O3. So the other thing that's really interesting that's happening is, and that also gives us this optimism, is it took us, I think, 18 months to go from GPT-3 to GPT-4. And, that's relatively fast. You probably don't remember how, if we went back to GPT-3 today, after you're used to GPT-4, you'd be like, ugh, I mean, at the time it was mind-blowing, and like we whooshed past the Turing test, and everyone, I remember I was like, I can't believe I live in this world where these things exist. But now you'd go back to GPT-3 and it would be like, ugh, I'm not going to use that. So that took 18 months. We have gone from 01 to 03 in about 3 months. So the iteration cycle is compressing. And we're already training the model that comes after 03. It looks like we're going to see another big jump in capabilities. So the reason we're super excited about this is the models are getting really smart really quickly. I'll say one last thing.
And then you're going to tell me when.
And then of course I'll give you the hour that we're going to launch.
Okay, great.
So when we launched the preview of 01, one of the ways that we benchmark these models, especially in coding, is by having them effectively enter competitive coding contests. And it's a good benchmark because you can kind of do these things asynchronously, so you can enter them as if they were a human and they get scored in the same way that any human would. And the first version of these models was like the millionth best coder or something like that, which it's not bad. You're still top 2 or 3% in the world. But the second version, when we actually announced, or when we launched the sort of full first version of this new model, 01, it was like the 1,000th best engineer in the world, a software engineer at these competitive coding problems. 03 will be the 175th best engineer in the world. And that's, again, we're talking like 3, 4, 5 months between these things. You've gone from a millionth to 175th. So you can imagine where it goes in the future as we continue to see meaningful steps up. So that's why we're so excited about these models. We launch 2 versions of these things. There's sort of a mini version that retains a lot of its core competencies around things like math and software engineering, but doesn't keep all of its world knowledge. But it's very fast and very cheap to inference as well. And then we have the sort of full model that is, that kind of brings it all together. So we'll launch the 03 mini version very soon, and we'll follow up with 03. I would expect, we said sort of February, March if everything goes right. So that's what we're shooting for.
All right. I think actually even sets the stage for the next product I'm going to ask you about, which is agents.
Amazing.
When?
I think 2025 is the year that agents become real, and that we go from, today if you use ChatGPT, you're using it mostly to answer questions, right? You ask it something, gives you an answer. You ask it something, gives you an answer. In 2025, ChatGPT is going to start doing things for you in the real world. As I think about my own day and the way that I spend my time, or even like the way that I spend my time in a browser, say, like just start with the digital world. Maybe half of the things that I'm doing in a browser, are actually things that I'm interested in. I'm reading a Wall Street Journal article, of course, by Joanna.
You're half interested in that?
No, I said I am. Half the time I'm interested. Yeah. That was an example of something I was interested in.
Yes.
So I'm reading something. I'm watching a YouTube video or whatever. Like I'm actually interested in what I'm doing in the browser. The other half, I'm like filling out my kids' soccer forms or something, and it takes 30 minutes out of my day, and I really wish I had that 30 minutes back. Why can't AI do that for me? So these are the kinds of things that ChatGPT is going to be able to do for you. We've been working not just on the reasoning stuff that I was just talking about, but also on what we call multimodality, making ChatGPT not just understand text when you type, but to be able to interact in all the ways that we interact as humans. So it can speak to you, you can speak to it, and it can understand you. By the way, in like 50 to 100 languages. It can also see, so you can point your phone and it can understand what's going on. It can look at your screen in a browser and understand what's happening in your browser the same way that you and I do. It's not parsing HTML. It's actually just looking at the visual elements on the screen and understanding what they mean. That's a search box. If I click on this, this is what's going to happen, etc. And so, like once you have those primitives, you can start to build these things, and it's just like we're solving problems for people. We're giving you back time that otherwise would have gone to stuff that like isn't super fulfilling, And so you get to spend more time doing stuff that matters.
So just like to back up, I'm imagining a tool, and I'm going to imagine it, and you tell me if this is what you're building. It sees what's on my computer screen. I tell it, go fill out my kid's lunch form.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm have to be a little bit more precise. I hit enter, and it can go do that. And can it submit? The idea is that this is taking that action and then even going further to really take the action.
Yeah, and I'll do you one better on the launch dates. We've already launched some of this stuff. We have a desktop app on Mac and Windows. You can download it. So rather than being in a browser tab, you can use this desktop app. And being in a desktop app, you can do a little bit more. You can see the ChatGPT, with your permission, of course, can see the whole screen, can see the apps that you're using and what you're doing with them. And we ask, you have to give your explicit permission before it can look at any particular window. But it can already do things like look at, if you're writing code or you're in a terminal, maybe you got some compiler error and you're like, I don't know what this is. You can just say, look at this app, and what do I do? How do I fix it? And it can read what's on the screen and can say, oh, well, you sort of save yourself a copy and a paste back and forth. And in the near future, you can imagine it's just going to say, oh yeah, here, let me just fix that for you. Right? So we're already doing that in the desktop app. And then it's now about bringing this more broadly. But I mean,
this year.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely, absolutely. You'll start to see this stuff in Q1 and a steady drumbeat. Wow. And a lot of this is we want to do this in a way that gives people control. Right? Models are not perfect. They're not going to be perfect in Q1 or in Q2. They're still going to make mistakes. And as they're off doing things for you in the real world, mistakes can actually take on, they can have more gravity than if it gives you a wrong answer to a question that you asked ChatGPT. And so a bunch of what we're working on is how do we make sure that we sort of understand what's reversible and what's not, and allow you to control any actions that it's actually going to take. So maybe it fills in the form for you and then says, hey, look, I finished. Why don't you hit submit? Maybe in some cases you trust it because you've done it a few times and you're comfortable with it hitting submit. But if you asked it to go, order something for you on Amazon, you don't want it to hit submit. You want it to go fill up the cart and then you come back. And so teaching the model sort of where are these checkpoints where you're not supposed to act, just get it ready and let the person make the final call. And that's going to be a sort of a barrier that I imagine, or that boundary will probably shift over time as the models get better and as we learn more about them and people come to trust them, but we want to give people control.
It's really sort of a work towards trust. It's like a version of AI trust falls.
AI trust falls, that's great.
I think there's a lot of talk about how fast this stuff is progressing. And
yes.
We're hearing, just this week, some reports OpenAI's got a PhD level agent. Is this stuff really moving as fast?
Yeah. So, if I were to describe my own kind of journey in how fast this stuff is moving, my own kind of almost like epistemic and emotional journey, if we go back all the way to 2018, 2017, a couple years after I was first in this field, my perspective then, I was one of the first to document, along with my co-founders at Anthropic, the scaling laws, which says you pour more compute into these models, they get better at everything, and really everything. My view from about then to 6 months ago was I suspect, based on these trends, that we are going to get to models that are better than almost all humans at almost everything. I guess that it would happen sometime in the 2020s, probably mid 2020s. But the way I always said it was, I don't know. I'm not sure. We could be wrong. And I think that's the right attitude to have. Particularly when you're the CEO of one of these companies, if you just say this is definitely going to happen, it's going to be great. You're all, you just sound like a hype man, right? So I think until about 3 to 6 months ago, I had substantial uncertainty about it. I still do now, but that uncertainty is greatly reduced. I think that over the next 2 or 3 years, I am relatively confident that we are indeed going to see models that show up in the workplace, that consumers use, that are, yes, assistants to humans, but are gradually get better than us at almost everything. And the positive consequences are going to be great. The negative consequences, we also will have to watch out for. I think progress really is as fast as people think it is. One thing that I will criticize is I actually think it's very important now that fast progress is relatively likely to appreciate it with the proper gravity and to talk seriously about it. Some of the other companies, I won't name any names, there's just all these, it's all these weird Twitter rumors, like employees talk, have this kind of sly, winking, nod to oh, there's these amazing things we're doing here. I actually think that's dangerous because someone on the outside looking at it is like, oh man, that's just hype. That kind of communication gives the impression that this stuff is not serious, and I think it's that's really dangerous to do when it actually is serious. I think the AI industry as a whole actually has an obligation to point to the seriousness of the moment that we're in. If we're really saying there are incredible positive things that are possible, and inevitably with any change this large there are risks, we have an obligation to communicate seriously about it and to say what we actually think.
And I want to get to what you want some of those what the risks are and what you want some of the rules and regulations to be. But before we get that, I want to back up to what you said about coworkers and all the talk here. They should just rename Davos Agent Palooza. It's just everything is agents. Everyone's talking about they've got agents. They're coming agents. You call this virtual collaborators. You have a different term for that. How are you progressing on agents or virtual collaborators? And we saw some signs of that with computer use at the end of last year. Give us a little roadmap, and specifically, I know you don't want to talk about dates, but what are we getting this year? What are we really realistically going to see this year? And your company is at the head of a lot of this, so we can kind of get rid of a lot of the hype.
So first of all, I should just disambiguate a little. I think agents, there are these terms that come up with a regular frequency in our field that don't really mean anything. I think agents is one, AGI is one, ASI is one, reasoning is one. They sound like they mean something if you're outside, but they have no precise technical meaning. So agents are used for anything from Clippy to I press the button on this AI system and it writes a complete app for me and founds a company or something. I think what we have in mind is somewhat closer to the second one. So our version of this is virtual collaborators. And so you mentioned computer use. Computer use is maybe an early instantiation of that. It's one of the ingredients. But I think the thing we have in mind is and this could be, an assistant in your workplace, an assistant that you use personally, but there's a model that is able to do anything on a computer screen that a kind of virtual human could do. And you talk to it, you give it a task, and maybe it's a task it does over a day where, you say, we're going to implement this product feature. And what that means, it's writing some code, testing the code, deploying that code to some test surface, talking to coworkers, writing design docs, writing Google Docs, writing Slack, sending emails to people. And just like a human, the model goes off and does a bunch of those things and then checks in with you every once in a while. So I would think of it as an agent. I would think of it as like an autonomous virtual collaborator that acts on your behalf on a very long time scale and that you check in with every once in a while. And you think of it as having all the piping, all the inputs and outputs of a human operating virtually.
And so time scale on that, as you've mentioned,
I suspect, you can never be sure with these things. The process of research is incredibly unpredictable. I don't know for sure what will happen with us. I don't know for sure what will happen in the industry, but I do suspect, I'm not promising, I do suspect that a very strong version of these capabilities will come this year. And it may be in the first half of this year.
So let's talk about the elephant or agent in the room, which is that's going to affect human work, right? You just described a lot of jobs that we have people doing.
Yes. So I generally separate this out into short term and long term. In the short term, we've seen technological disruption of labor many times in the past. And I think in the short term, and in my kind of time compressed world, short term is maybe a year or 2 years or maybe 3. We've on that time scale, we I won't say we have a perfect solution, but we've seen before technological disruption of labor, and I think there it's important to think in terms of workers being adaptable, in terms of taking advantage of comparative advantage. Comparative advantage is remarkable. Even if a machine does 90% of your job, what happens is that the other 10% becomes super leveraged. You spend all your time doing that 10%. You do 10 times more of the 10% than you did before, and you get 10 times more done because the other 90% is leveraged. So that can be good for humans. You can also learn how to sculpt your efforts around what the machine is doing. And so we can also think from a product perspective how to design our products to enable complementarity rather than substitution. There was this interesting study from the economist Eric Brynjolfsson about a year ago that said, by default, when companies deploy AI, they tend to deploy it in a replacement mode. But when they think more, when they pay more attention to deployment, they often find ways to deploy it in a complementary mode. When they do that, the productivity increases are greater. So that suggests there's some path dependence. There are different ways to deploy the technology. And we are thinking about that as we design this virtual collaborator. Again, I'm not going to lie to you. There's a brutally efficient market here, right? If doing things in a complementary way is like, somehow will be reliably outcompeted in the market by not doing things in a complementary way, then the whole industry is in a difficult position, and we have to think about how to get around that. So there are very powerful market forces here, but I think there may be an opportunity compatible with those market forces to take a different path that's better for the whole industry, that's innovative, that manages to be better for humans while outcompeting the other approaches. That's a short term. In the long term, I feel very strongly that I don't know exactly when it'll come. I don't know if it'll be 2027. I think it's plausible it could be longer than that. I don't think it will be a whole bunch longer than that, when AI systems are better than humans at almost everything, better than almost all humans at almost everything, and then eventually better all humans than everything. Even robotics, we make good enough AI systems, they'll enable us to make better robots. And so when that happens, we will need to have a conversation at places like this, right? At places like this event about, how do we organize our economy, right? How do humans find meaning, right? There are a lot of assumptions we made when humans were the most intelligent species on the planet that are going to be invalidated by what's happening with AI. And I think the only good thing about it is that we'll all be in the same boat. I'm actually afraid of the world where 30% of human labor becomes fully automated by AI, and the other 70%. That's going to cause this just incredible, class war between the groups that have been and the groups that haven't been. If we're all in the same boat, it's not going to be easy, but I actually feel better about it, because we're going to have to sit down and say, whoa, it's not like we're randomly picking every third person and saying you're useless. We're all in the same boat. We've recognized that we've reached the point as a technological civilization where the idea, there's huge abundance and huge economic value, but the idea that the way to distribute that value is for humans to produce economic labor, and this is where they feel their sense of self-worth. Once that idea gets invalidated, we're all going to have to sit down and figure it out. And I'm not going to lie. My true belief is that is coming. I think AI companies are going to be at the center of that, or maybe in the crosshairs of that, and we have a responsibility to have an answer there.